Oh, that actually worked. Hey guys, how you
Hi,
doing?
guys.
Welcome to A Brief History of Mystery. How are we
Evening.
all?
Good.
Well,
Good.
Yeah, good, thanks.
Good.
that was my first time messing around putting a video on and stuff at the start, so I'm quite pleased that worked. So, hey, I'm going to take my glasses off because I see the lights in it. Right, we are talking the missing 411 this evening, and we are going to tell you a few case studies, and we're going to do what David Pallades never does, and we're actually going to tell you what we think is actually going on. So let's strap ourselves in and get on with it. So, first of all, how are we all?
I'm doing good.
Good.
I'm all right. Yeah, not bad. Yeah.
Yeah,
good.
keeping well.
Right, so this is our Mystery Machine episode that we're going to be doing every Wednesday. We share it through the channels. Come join us on Facebook. You can see it going across the bottom. And if you go to the description, the link to go straight to it is right there as well. Okay, so let's just get cracked straight on, shall we? Let's talk about this David Pallades fella. What is the... let's tell you what. So David Pallades is a police detective in America, lives in Colorado. I say that, I'm just going to double check that. He does live in Colorado. Yeah. He was a police detective from 1977 to 1996. He had a real interest in Bigfoot. And then while he was sort of wandering around some state parks, a couple of sort of whistleblower park rangers grabbed hold of him one day and went, you should really look into this missing people in national parks. We're going to come back to David a little bit later, if that's all right. So what's your initial instinct when you first heard about this story? Because to be honest, I'm completely new to this. I'm a complete newbie. So, Damien, I know you've had a recent interest in that.
Yeah, I have had a recent interest in it. Yeah, probably heard quite a lot of the stories through Mr. Ballon or read quite a bit.
What's your
Online.
instinct, though? Do you believe it?
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting disappearances. He makes them fit a profile, doesn't he? Being a police detective, so there's a lot of disappearances that obviously the 95% that he's not interested in. It's only that small 5% that fit his profile, and he's uncovering some strange patterns in these disappearances. Yeah, but very strange patterns, some correlations, particularly the one that stands out most, I suppose, is a lot of the hotspots of activity in North America appear to be around mountains that have got water, a lake by them, or a river. And they seem to hotspot in those locations.
I think well, this is what I wanted to talk about first. What makes it a 411 case? So, Dave, what are the sort of things do you take from that? Then, what makes it just not a missing persons case?
I think the sort of parameters of the gate, the goalposts, are what ostensibly did define it as moved from the initial group of cases that were highlighted by David Pallades. And I think Damien's mentioned a couple of them there. There are other things that sort of come into play. Things like a lot of the time they're usually never found. A lot of the people do have like underlying medical conditions. They're normally associated with strange weather events, or anomalous weather events. A lot of the topographic areas are also associated with specific ages and sexes, depending upon where they are around the world. I mean, I know that we're talking mainly about the cases in the USA, but they do happen around the world, and a lot of the victims tend to be found in areas that have been previously been searched when the victims are found. Usually, even though they might be naked and left out in the elements, they're found non-hypothermic. Which is, obviously by itself is also like a strange kind of thing. And as he said, like missing bodies of water or shoes, missing shoes are found with the clothes neatly folded at the side of the bodies. And
the missing
things like
clothing.
That, Yeah.
There's a few cases, isn't there? There's no bodies found, but they'll just find a pair of shoes at the top of a mountain or something.
Yeah.
It's just like, where's the rest of them? Some teeth and gross things like that. How long have you been interested in this then, Steve?
A couple
Where's
of
your
years.
interest come from?
Yeah, I caught David Palladdy's channel, the Can I'm Missing Project channel on YouTube a couple of years ago, and also listened to Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell and George Norrie. Radio station turned into podcasts and things like that. So first heard of his work a couple of years ago, and was just totally addicted to the basically what you found. Such a mystery, and as the other two guys have said, every case that he looks at, he takes away all different possibilities, any human interference, any animal attacks, anything like that, whether or not they've got any social issues, any drug dependence, anything like that. He won't look at it. He does almost a full FBI profile on each case, and that's where originally the 411 sort of come together. But I totally believe it. As Dave said a minute ago, the criteria for the original Missing 411 has sort of moved slightly. He's added different things into it now. Obviously, as he's looked into it throughout the years, and similar cases he's brought into it, and it is just absolutely mystifying. It really is. So yeah,
I think the fact that he doesn't have that rigidity to it is interesting, isn't it? Because the more cases he looks at, the more criteria he seems to increase or decrease, and he's not locked into one thing. He doesn't come out and say what he thinks it is very often, does he? Either he doesn't talk about theories.
What he does do is he will read a lot of the viewers' comments and letters and emails and things like that. He spends a lot of time doing that, and since he has started doing that, there's been some fantastic theories and ideas that these viewers have sent in, and I think since he started looking into that, all the different possibilities, scientists, doctors, lawyers, virtually every profession has sent their views in, and he's now come to the idea that it isn't anything to do with humans or animals or anything like that. It's something a lot more that we just don't have an idea about at the moment. So
there's a couple of the criteria we didn't mention. There was a lot of the time dogs, when they bring in dogs to try to track the missing person, they either won't or can't find. I think the dogs seem to lose the trail. 20 or 30 feet from where they were last seen, they're just gone. They can't find, or they just sit down and the dogs won't do it, which is interesting as well. If the victim is ever found alive, generally they can't remember what happened, or if they do remember what happened, they come up with some quite strange stories. One child was recollected of being taken into a cave and being asked loads of questions they didn't know the answer to, and there's stories like this. The one thing I found interesting was a lot of these are focused around either large boulder fields or large areas of granite, and I think we see a lot of that with a lot of paranormal stories. And the largest sort of boulder field in the world is Yosemite National Park, and that's also one of the biggest focuses of missing persons. So there's all these correlations he keeps finding, and like you said, he always takes away. The first thing he looks for is this a normal missing person case? Is this a missing person case of somebody's drug dependency or massively in debt or something else? And he dismisses them straight away if they find those things. So let's talk about some of the cases. So I hope you're all ready with your case studies as planned. It's Jane Barker first, and I think that is you, Dave.
Yeah, Mary Jane Barker.
There you go.
2 years old. This is 1957. Was playing in the backyard in New Jersey with her dog. And Mum went out. 10 minutes later, and both the dog and Mary Jane were missing. They searched the area with neighbours and police for 3 days. They started to use couldn't find anything at all. Searched all over the place, as you can well imagine. They searched a local construction site, didn't find anything at all. Questioning neighbours, and nobody had any idea what had gone on. No information whatsoever forthcoming. No people, that strangers seen in the area. On the fourth day, they got professional trackers in and the search area. They widened the search area, and the tracks were found in a creek bed, apparently of a large man and a dog and a child. On the sixth day, obviously between the time when they found these tracks in the creek bed, they were still continuing the search. And on the sixth day, in the construction site that they had previously searched, a family were there looking at a house that they were interested in buying, obviously. And the little girl that was with the family opens one of the closets in the house, and Mary Jane's dog jumps onto her and knocking her to the floor, which obviously makes her startled and startles the adults, and as you can well imagine. And inside the closet, they found Mary Jane was in there. Obviously, she was deceased. So they autopsied her, and it shows that she hadn't eaten any food for the full 6 days she'd been missing, and no evidence she or the dog had been in there for 6 days either. No fecal matter, no kind of epithelials or anything like that. So nothing to suggest that she had been in there for the full 6 days, just that after 6 days she was found in there, and no evidence to support that she'd eaten any food for 6 days. The only signs were the tracks that were found in the nearby creek bed, again, so associated with water, and associated with the creek bed that was running alongside the base of a hill. So all the parameters of a usual, or what's become a usual 411 case, and nothing. It come to a complete dead end. They've no idea. I don't even think they figured out how she died completely. That seems to be a bit of a grey area, and no forthcoming information about who took her, how she was taken, any tracks from the creek bed back to the construction site. None of them. So just a complete mystery. She was just found deceased in otherwise, I don't want to use these words superfluously, but otherwise, apart from being deceased, she was no marks of any injury, no marks of foul play, no indication that she'd been raped or assaulted or anything like that. Her body in a closet. Obviously, the dog's still alive, but Mary Jane was dead, unfortunately.
Christ, story. So what do you think of that then? Is that she was kept somewhere else and then moved? That seems to be the.
You would sort of again like to think is the wrong terminology, because we're talking about somebody's death,
Yeah.
And you wouldn't like to think that anybody had undergone anything to be killed, but you would lend itself to suggest that she had been killed somewhere else and then placed there.
Moved.
In a very short period of time before this family went looking at this house, went to view this house in this construction site, just purely off the fact alone that when the forensics were taken from the site, there was no evidence to suggest that she'd been in there for the 6 days she was missing. But likewise, the construction workers had been continuing work on this property, and she wasn't there then, again substantiating the fact that she hadn't been there for the 6 days she was missing. And just nothing at all. So how she got in there, they don't know how she got in there also. So you're talking about a very, very small amount of time with which she could have been placed in there. Nobody's seeing anybody responsible for moving the body. Again, I don't want to get into theories as to how the body could have got there until later when we start talking about possible theories of how these things happen. But very strange. It's a very strange case, Jamie,
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah, you all are, aren't they?
Well, we'll move on to Marie Stock de Metz, this is mine. So if you're all sitting comfortable, I'll tell you a little story. This was 1981. This Marie Stock was, all his friends called him Doc, was 84 years old, based in Colorado. He had a PhD in theology, and he had a fascination with like topaz hunting. So, you go get the rocks and you break the rocks open, and some of them are these beautiful topaz rock things. And it was in Pike National Park in an area called Devil's Head, and the locals believe this area was cursed. So immediately, this story's got a beautiful curse attached to it. It was on April 29th at about 10 a.m. Doc was taken by his friend David to this area to go and it's really important to remember that, or really important to know, the doc actually had, well, for one, he was 84 years old. For two, he actually had a blood condition, and he also had really bad knees. So to go and do this hobby of topaz hunting, he actually needed his friend Dave to drive him out there to help him get up the hill, get him into these areas where they could find these topazes. So Dave helped him that morning. Got there nice and early. He went to one site, left his friend Doc, and then moved up the hill and was doing what they were doing. Every so often, 15, 20 minutes or so, David would look down and just, give a wave and just shout to Doc and make sure he's okay, sort of thing. But around 3 p.m. that afternoon, David looked down to where he'd left Doc, and all of a sudden, Doc's gone. So he's like, Doc can't have come back up the hill. There's no way he made it up there on his own. So he goes down and starts having a look around. And he starts shouting him or what have you. And then he starts thinking, well, okay, maybe he has somehow got back up to the car. Well, no, first of all, he thought, well, maybe he's gone for a wee or something, maybe down a tree. So he had a look around. Then he goes back to the car thinking, oh, okay, well, maybe he's got back to the car somehow. There's nobody there. And he starts shouting, honking the horn, and all this sort of thing. A couple of guys on motorbikes turn up. And he's, David's, what's up, mate? What's going on? So David sort of says, look, my friend's gone. He's really unwell. He's an elderly gentleman. I need to find him. They start hunting around. Nothing. They find the police. They begin a hunt in the area, searching for him. Nothing. This goes on for about 10 days, and eventually they give up. His wife, Doc's wife, actually writes to the local governor, sort of saying, look, my husband can't have walked away. He must be there. Somebody's taken him. He can barely walk 2 feet on his own. So something's happened to my husband. We desperately need help. Nothing really happened. This is a complete mystery, and Maurice Doc de Metz has never been seen since. The reason why I picked the story, as much as anything else, is because actually the missing 411 has meant that they've now reopened the case. They've still not found anything. But the lovely thing I love about this is Dave Pauletz's work and hard work has actually reopened a cold case here that otherwise would have probably been forgotten to history. So regardless of what you think about the missing 411, he's actually doing really, really important work. And, this case has been reopened simply because of these stories.
Of his work,
yeah, of this work. So I mean, I just love that. But I mean, what do you think about this then? This guy, they never found a body, ever. He could barely walk, and he was 84 years old. Where did he go? There was no animal tracks. A bear didn't come and carry him off. There was no fight marks or anything. Any ideas? It's crazy, isn't it?
There are some, but I think we're trying to save them, aren't we, for the towards the end? I was about to jump in.
I was more disciplined than that. I thought I'm not even going to bite.
I like a bite though, because then I can ridicule you. All right now. Well, the next story is Dennis Martin. Who's got Dennis Martin?
Dennis Martin, I believe that is me. Again, Dennis Martin.
Oh, I've done this in the wrong order, haven't I? It's just me and you.
That's fine.
Do you want me to do him, or do you want to move on to one of the other victims?
No, go on, do him because I've got him in an order.
Dennis Martin, 6 years old. This is 1969, the Appalachian Trail. He disappeared when he was out with his dad and his granddad. And they met up with another family that were playing out in the area that were also called Martin. So two families called Martin. And the kids started to play together. So Dennis started to play with the children of this other Martin family. They all ran behind a bush. And the usual kind of shenanigans. And they all came out from the other side of this brush area, apart from Dennis. Dennis didn't come out from the other side of it. He'd gone in with the other children, didn't come out the other side. So obviously they started to panic and look around, shout out his name and all the rest of it. Now, just further down the Appalachian Trail, at a place called Rowan's Creek, there was a family by the name of Key, and they were walking the Appalachian Trail also, and they heard a scream. And then what they thought was a bear, initially, running from the tree line, and then realised it was a hairy man, what they described as being a hairy man, running through the woods. And this is, within a very short space of time of Dennis going missing. Anyway, the following day, they didn't find him, despite, intense searching. The Martin family helped them to search. Obviously, the Key family was separate. They weren't aware of the fact that Dennis had gone missing. But the FBI agents, some FBI agents, turned up at the Martins, Dennis's parents' house, to meet. Sorry, no, they turned up at the Keys family house, I beg your pardon, to interview the Keys, because they said they'd seen a hairy man running from the trees. And interviewed them, asked them some strange questions that the Keys were really concerned about, why they were being asked these particular questions and why they were being questioned in the first place, indeed. And again, about 3 days later, the Green Berets arrived at the park to help search for Dennis, but ordered all the people that were involved in the search. And you've got the park rangers were involved in the search, local police were involved in the search, you've got family members involved in the search, and friends. But the Green Berets are saying, you search this area, stay well away from us, don't get involved in what we're doing. That's it. Quite pretty much the cold shoulder from the military regarding this search for Dennis Martin. The Key family, when they would have been interviewed by the FBI, turned around and said that they saw the hairy man, what appeared to be carrying somebody on the back, carrying a young child on the back when they were running away. And then that was about it. It sort of drew to a close. They never found Dennis, and the FBI did have some kind of interaction with the Green Berets. The Green Berets are the military at top level, but during the search, they weren't interested in any kind of interaction. The lead investigator from the FBI ended up committing suicide a year later. Apparently, he was never the same person after conducting the investigation, up until the time that he took his own life. And a year or two before this, before Dennis went missing on the Appalachian Trail, Park Ranger was attacked by what they sort of described as being a wild man or a mountain man that was very large, very hairy, and sort of beat him to within an inch of his life, which led to the Park Rangers then becoming armed. But they're well known in that particular area, apparently, that there is wild men that are pretty much homeless people that cover themselves in fur pelts, and they live within the park. The rangers do have to deal with them quite regularly. Was that responsible for Dennis going missing? I mean, the children that were with him when he was playing out from the other Martin family couldn't even explain where he went. They didn't see anybody in the bushes that could have taken him. He was at the side of them, stood right next to them as they were playing, and then as they walked out of the bushes, he did not materialize from the other side, and that's it. He's never been found since. His body's never been recovered. There were no tracks there. There were no footprints of any adult, from what I can believe. No evidence of a struggle. There was nowhere within the brush that he could have been just left or buried without being found. He just completely disappeared off the face of the earth, and he's never been found since.
There's also
mole people.
There's also no. What I'm trying to say. So, if you expect someone to get taken by a creature or something like that, especially kids and things, or anybody really, you would expect to hear a scream or shouting for help, but you never do. You never ever do. Occasionally,
dragged underground by mole people. Telling you.
Yeah, possibly.
I've solved it. Boom.
Occasionally, people will hear. There's a couple of instances of hikers and runners, joggers, that sort of thing, on different trails and stuff all around America, and hearing people calling for help, but not being able to sort of pinpoint where it's coming from, just a local sort of area. So they'll go and search and find nothing. Then they'll go back down to the local sheriff's office to report. And then they'll say, yeah, we've had similar reports. And they'll go up there, check it out, and not ever find anything. It's crazy weird. Crazy.
All right, let's move on. Who's got Keith Parker?
Well, that's my story, I think, next. But before I go into that one, there's one interesting part I was going to add to the end of the your story, Dave. his dad felt like he got the hump, didn't he, quite a bit from the FBI and the Green
Yeah.
Berets. So I'm sure at one point he even went, the Keys, after being interviewed by the FBI, went and spoke to the dad and told him about the sighting and let him know that they'd had the interview with the FBI.
Because the Martins hadn't even been informed about this at all. They didn't even know that the Key family had been contacted until the Keys knocked on the door. You're right, yeah.
Yeah. So what? Yeah, where was I going with that? So yeah,
we'll come back to that because I mean, David Paulides describes a lot of stories about how the officials didn't seem to want him to find anything, did they? So, but go on, tell us about Keith Parker then.
Yeah, and he also tracked the distance from where he went missing to the tree line where the Keys saw the creature running with it, and wondered if it was possible in the time that had elapsed from when they spotted him on that tree line and managed to do it in that time frame, which was quite interesting. But anyway, on to Keith Parkins. So Keith Parkins, it was back in the spring of 1952 in Rither, Oregon. He was a 2-year-old child that went missing. They launched a search immediately after he went missing out near the wilderness in Oregon. And then he was found, I think it was 12 miles away, 28 hours later, or no, sorry, 20 hours later it was, rather 12 miles away. But the interesting thing is that he was found with no clothing that was for the night out to keep him alive in the cold winter conditions. He was face down when he was found in the ground, which is quite a common occurrence with a lot of these missing people that turn up. He had scratch marks all over his face, which he said from the cat that scratched him, that was the very little amount that he could actually, I suppose, compose as a 2-year-old in terms of explaining what had happened to him over that 20-hour period. And the really interesting thing is there's an adventurist as well, Lars Stroll, that went out to see if he could cover that same 12-mile distance in 20 hours through this extreme wilderness in winter, in spring conditions, as it was early spring, and he couldn't do it as a fully grown adult.
I've seen that in the 4-on-1 documentary, doesn't he? Doesn't he a couple of miles and go, "This is dangerous. I can't do this." Because it was getting dark, and he said, "This is a mountain. Someone's gonna get hurt." The 2-year-old apparently did it.
Yeah, it's a 2-year-old kid in just normal clothing, nothing special for the outdoors, for the cold, for a night out. And he was interviewed in later life about it, obviously being a survivor and having been found, and has no recollection of the event, which I suppose isn't a surprise for a 2-year-old. Yeah, it's a completely fascinating one. Something moved him that 12 miles. And the other interesting point actually to look at with this story that I want to mention is, how did they know to look for that child 12 miles away? Why were the search team even looking 12 miles away for a child that disappeared 20 hours ago in that kind of terrain? That would be outside any belt, the outskirts of your zone, wouldn't it, that you'd start in?
For a 2-year-old.
Yeah, the search grid, you mean?
Yeah, the search grid that you'd establish from the last point that he was lost and how far he could travel in those conditions.
You'd start going that far if you think he's been kidnapped or something, wouldn't you? But isn't this the same? So, because one of the theories was this was probably somebody in an ATV kidnapped him and took him that far out. But then when they looked at it, there's no roads, there's no trails in these areas, there's no properties.
Well, that's what you would do. You would close off the roads. You wouldn't necessarily start searching undergrowth and ground. The roads would be closed off. They would start to, they would implement certain things in place regarding that kind of thing. That certain protocols would come in, but to actually start to search ground and undergrowth and shrubbery and bush and land, it is well without, it's well outside the confines of what would usually be a search grid. And given the amount of time as well.
Yeah, I mean, it would take an adult would take 4 to 5 hours on reasonably flat ground to cover 12 miles. But that's on flat ground, an adult. A 2-year-old. I've had a couple of 2-year-olds. They unfortunately, if they get lost or they get upset, they just sit down and scream. There's no logic. There's no, I need to find my way out of this, because they're 2. They just scream and they just sit down on their backsides. They don't keep walking. They don't think, I wonder what's behind the next corner. They just sit down and start screaming.
That's it, especially at mountains and stuff like that.
A 10-year-old, maybe. 2-year-old, no chance. Okay. I'll move on to the next story. Bobby Bizup. I picked this mainly because I like anybody called Bobby, and Bizup is a funny name. 1958. This was a 10-year-old lad. He was deaf. He came from a very strong Catholic family, and they'd sent him away to Catholic camp, which I actually went to Catholic school. Sounds really dangerous to me, but this is not the risks that I would have thought he would actually have been worried about. But he went to St. Malo Church in the Rocky Mountain National Park. This basically was a retreat camp at the base of a mountain. There was a river that came down the mountain, and Bobby was up there fishing. So a camp counselor sort of came up, and it was early evening, and sort of waved at him, got his attention. So, come on, it's time to go now. And the camp counselor says he saw Bobby turn, sort of see him, and start walking towards him. The counselor sort of got hold of the rest of the kids. So, come on now, guys, we've got to go. So he then walked back down the path back to the camp. When they got to the camp, though, they realised Bobby hadn't followed them. Now, from where Bobby was, you could actually see down the hill, and you could see the camp, so you could physically see it. But also the river he was fishing on, if you actually follow the river down the hill, it went through the camp as well. So there was no way he could physically get lost, to be honest. You could see where he was supposed to go. And there was basically, even if he got lost on the path or something, all he had to do was find the river, and he could have, again, followed himself back down. And this was in 1958, by the way, I should say. So the camp counselor immediately sort of runs back up the hill, thinking, he's fallen over or something, I'll go find him. No sign of him. He gets 3 other counsellors. They go looking. They can't find him. They obviously then phone the police. They get the military out, everything else. They start doing helicopter searches, and they start, really looking for him. 10 days they searched. They found nothing. This search was called off. People sort of moved on. But the counsellors never really let it go. So whenever they had sort of free time, little groups of them would go up and keep searching, because they just always thought that he was there somewhere and they wanted to find him. So there was an area that they thought was very inhospitable, very difficult to get to, but they thought if he's anywhere, if there's been some sort of accident, he might be there. So they went back to this. It had been searched loads of times, but then 1 year after he went missing, they got into this very inhospitable place, very difficult to get to. They have to go up over an edge and down back, and it's really inhospitable. They suddenly came across a hearing aid, and then they found a couple of teeth and a couple of other bones. Obviously, something had happened to this lad. But the interesting thing I thought about this case in particular was this was an area that had been searched several times. These counsellors were basically there out of desperation. They weren't really looking to any pattern or any logic to their search. They were just they just desperately wanted to find the lad. That's why I picked this story. It was because this is, and it wasn't even that far away from the camp when they actually did finally find him. So why on earth couldn't the military, the helicopters, so on and so on, find him much sooner? Going to move on to the next story, do we think? Who's got Stephen Kubacki?
Oh, that's me as well. Okay. Right then, Stephen Kubacki. He is quite an interesting case as well. Slightly different from the last case. So he was 20-year-old guy that was studying at Hope University in Michigan, studying German and history there. Just going back a little bit, but not probably as far back as some of the other cases you guys have been going through. So it goes back to February 1978. And he decided...
I was born in 1978. I was literally born like 2 weeks after that, or 2 weeks before that. So It's not relevant to anything, but
I was going to say, yeah,
Just
irrelevant,
old.
but yeah. Yeah.
mold.
And he, I don't know, he's quite an avid outdoorsman. He liked, I suppose, he was a bit more adventurous than most of the people probably studying at his religious university. So he liked to go out on solo ski trips quite a lot, and he decided to go up to Lake Michigan area to go up there in February of 1978, a few months before he was due to graduate, I think that year. There's been a lot of disappearances actually in that Lake Michigan area. They call it the Michigan Triangle. It's like the Bermuda Triangle from the early 1800s to the present day. There's constant cases from that triangle. I don't know whether it is a big thing or not. But
you do get hot spots, so don't you, with this story?
You do. I suppose it depends whether you believe in the Bermuda Triangle, doesn't it? I guess. But so anyway, he went out for this solo ski trip, but he was more than proficient outdoors. So yeah, no one thought he was in any danger doing this. So he went off on his own, and obviously disappeared while he was out. There was a group of snowmobilers that happened to be out there at the same time that he was, and they came across some ski tracks leading up to the edge of the lake where then there was some skis, some ski poles, some goggles, like he'd taken some of his stuff off and walked out onto the lake and perhaps fallen through it and yeah, got under the ice and couldn't get back out the lake. So that's what they told his wife and the family. But anyway, 2 days later, she was obviously coming to terms with this news. And she got a phone call from an unknown number, but obviously recognised her husband's voice immediately on the other end of the phone, all confused, unsure where he'd been, what had happened for the last 2 days. So she told him to phone the police. He phoned the police. He gave details of what he could see. They, and triangulated his position, I assume, figured out where he was, and then obviously arranged to go and collect him. This had all happened though in Lake Michigan, I think, which is on the east coast, isn't it? He was found 2,900 miles away on the west coast near Sacramento, California, in his ski gear.
It's a twist. I wasn't expecting the phone call. Never mind. Okay.
Yeah, he was found in his 700. No, sorry, Odin, was it 15? No, sorry. This is I was getting the stories confused here. It was actually this story. For Stephen Kubacki, he was found 15 months later, rather, when he turned back up at home.
All right, okay.
After being missing for 15 months, turned up at home. He said he woke up 40 miles away in a field, which is 700 miles away from Lake Michigan, where he'd gone out. He'd gone to his aunt's house because he realised she was close to where he'd woken up, and she'd given him a lift back to the family home. He had a backpack full of trinkets from travelling around various places in the USA, T-shirt from running a marathon, new backpack, new clothes, all stuff that he didn't recognise, and pretty much had no recollection of that entire 15-month period at all. Was shy from the media, and didn't really want to discuss it at all. But in the brief comments he did make, he said, "I feel like I've been running a lot."
He did a Forrest Gump.
Yeah, this is exactly what I was going to come to. Yeah, he did a Forrest Gump. Yeah, this is why it was quite an interesting story.
And he was married, so and then he couldn't remember. Okay. Brilliant. I love that story. That's great. Nora. Oh man, I can't say this. Nora Quarin.
Yeah.
Quarin. Nora Quarin.
Bless
Steve,
her.
hit us.
Yeah, so this one's quite recent, 2018. David Pilaris looked into this a couple of times, whether or not it was came into a missing 411 profile. But anyway, he covered it in one of his videos, so I'm going to sort of chat about that now. So, 15-year-old girl, she had a lot of learning difficulties, issues, and she also wasn't too steady on her feet as well. She had like mobility issues as well. Her and her family from Ireland, French-Irish descent, went on holiday to I can't remember where it was. flipping it, wherever it was, Malaysia. That's it. So they arrived there, and I think it was the first night. I think it was the first night, and father woke up the next morning to realise that his daughter was not there and disappeared. Now, the investigative team did notice that the upper floor window in the area where she was sleeping with her two siblings as well was slightly open. So it wasn't wide open, it wasn't full open or half open, it was just slightly ajar. And you could open that from the outside and from the inside. But what it doesn't state is how high this window is from the ground, which I think is quite important. So anyway, the Malaysian police got her mother to basically say a message, like record a message, so that they could play it out on loudspeaker phones in the jungle, hoping that the daughter would return. So the daughter would only respond to her mother's voice as well. She wouldn't really respond to anyone else, even in the family. Extremely close to her mother, never wandered off from like a mum's sight normally. So anyway, search and rescue team couldn't find a thing, not a damn thing. And then 10 days later, she was found in a previously searched area, as is 90% or 95% of the 411 cases. She was undressed, so we don't know if that's naked or not. There are reports that she had panties on, and she was laid down with her hands behind her head as though she was fast asleep. And also no marks on her body, or no serious injury marks on her body. She had no shoes on, and the soles of her feet were pristine, especially from walking around that area of the jungle, which is another characteristic of 411. And apparently the autopsy was that she died from gastrointestinal bleeding, which is led on by extreme hunger and stress. Yeah, so she was found in previously searched place, which was, some reports reckon it was a kilometre away. Other reports say it was up to like 2.2, 2.5 kilometres, depending where you get your sources from. And yeah, it's bizarre. Her family absolutely state that it's completely out of characteristic of their daughter to do anything like this whatsoever. And yeah, extremely bizarre. I mean, the upper floor window, a kid that's got, mobility issues and learning issues and things like that. It's a tricky one. There was no CCTV because the resort where they were staying don't allow their lighting. Sorry, don't allow lighting because they like all the natural light of the stars and things like that. There's no air conditioning or TV or anything like that. It's quite wild where they went.
Sounds like a wicked holiday.
Yeah, and extremely bizarre. Yeah, just fascinating. Really is, and and it's a characteristic as well that again, the soles of the feet, the missing shoes, in some cases clothes that are found folded up and things like that. It is bizarre.
The clean feet is fascinating, isn't it? Or how pristine she was, because if there's one thing I know about jungles, is that they're lovely and clean. The animals like to spring clean, I think. So that's a strange one. Dave, I think this one's yours. We've got the last couple now before we start digging into what we actually think is going on here, because we've got a lot to talk about now. But the Stacey Ann Harris, this I know this one is because this one's been shredded and torn apart and left, right, centre, hasn't it? Really over the years. So tell us the story, Dave.
Yeah, Stacey Ann Arras. This is 1981. 15-year-old girl in Saratoga, out riding with the dad and a group of other people, as they are wont to do in that particular region. Near a place called Sunrise Camp, which is about 9,000 feet, I believe. Rode into an area where there were some remote cabins, where people can stay at, it's, as again is their want. She gets off her horse, goes into one of these cabins to change her clothes, because then she's going to go walking around with a camera to take pictures. She tells her dad that she's going off for a walk. With one of the people that was with their group, he was a 71-year-old man, perhaps infirm, sort of trusted him as an older gentleman, perhaps. And the subsequent events make me believe that he was infirm, and it was an opportunity for her to take some photographs. So it was a very picturesque area. Makes a lot of sense. So she decided to go to a spot with a particularly good view to take these photographs, which is overlooking the lake. And after a while of walking up to this point, the old guy needs to sit down, because he says he's tired. So he sits down on a rock to recover, get his energy back, and stuff. And Stacey, it tells him that she's going to walk down a nearby trail to the lake. Now this trail has got a few trees on either side of it, but otherwise it's pretty clearly visible from where the old guy was and from many other places straight the way down. There's only one way in, there's only one way out to the side of the lake from this trail. And other hikers nearby could see the old man. Other hikers nearby that were going to this spot where she wanted to take the photographs from gave them a really good vantage point to see out over the trail and also to see the lake and the lake side. And she walks into these trees. She goes down this trail through the trees, which, like I say, is sparsely populated on either side of the trail, but doesn't appear at the lake. She doesn't appear on the other side of the tree. She doesn't appear at the lake. And she doesn't come back up the trail towards where the old man is resting and where the other hikers are. She's pretty much, to all intents and purposes, disappears again off the face of the planet. And searches were conducted over that area for years, for absolutely years, to try and find any evidence of Stacey being abducted, being taken, any kind of a struggle, any bones that she might have been taken by wild animals or anything for that matter, and nothing at all. And this, like I said, this is going on for years. Never found. The only thing that was found was the cap of a camera lens. So a camera lens cap was found, which was pretty much in the trail that she walked down towards the lakeside. In that sparsely populated tree line, right on the edge of that tree line, was found the cap for the lens, the camera lens cover, and that was it. And nothing else at all. The case just completely come to a close. Now, people have looked into it. I think even David Pilates has looked into this and been sort of like stopped these because case files from other police departments on missing people, they get archived, they get stored, obviously, because they become cold cases, but they're also there for reference for other police forces and interaction with other governing bodies and other agencies that can help try and find a conclusion to these cold cases. Even independent researchers and private investigators and things like that. And they're archived, they're stored there for reference and for people to review them on request. Apart from Stacey's, it's never released, or there's always excuses said that it's gone missing. Whenever anybody's trying to put in any kind of request to be able to view any of what the police and indeed the FBI have got, they hit a brick wall. They get no information whatsoever, or like I said, they just get told that the case file has gone missing. Game over. It doesn't progress anywhere from there. It just stops dead. Never been found.
Which is another. It's another mark, isn't it, of a lot of these cases where they get stonewalled and the FBI, police, and etc. don't seem to want to actually help. So we've got our last case before we start digging into everything else. Dala, this is you, Damien. Danny Philippidis.
I'd guess.
There we go. We'll go with that.
Sounds Greek origin, maybe. I don't know. Probably not. Anyway, because he's a Canadian. So, but anyway, this is actually a much more recent case than a lot of them. Early 2018. He's a 49-year-old firefighter that was on a skiing trip that he goes on every year, I think, to Whiteface in New York State. Him and I think 7 friends went. There are 8 of them going there for this ski trip, which he looks forward to quite a lot. Each year. Anyway, when they were there, he was obviously skiing on the slope, having a great time. 7 friends decided to stop for some food. He decided to stay out there, but by himself on the slope, and that he'd meet them a bit later after he'd had a couple more runs down the mountain. Anyway, when it got to sort of early mid-evening, by the time obviously it got dark and the mountain was closing for the night and he hadn't come back, they obviously got a bit worried. So they went and spoke to the hotel that he was staying at, asked them if they could check his room, went up, checked his room. I found his car in the car park on the way in there, then went up in and checked his room. Found his passport, cash, most of his stuff, personal belongings in the room. So he obviously hadn't taken a lot with him that day, when he gone out onto the slopes. So anyway, there was no sign of Danny. There was a massive search launch for him. Didn't find him. They called the search off and just assumed that he must have succumbed to the elements somehow. And that was the story that was given to his nearest and dearest. And due to the heavy snow, the body was probably hidden, and that they might find him in the when the weather calms down a bit, and they've got it's a bit warmer and there's less snow cover, and they'll probably find the body. So anyway, 2 days later, his wife, who's been told this, gets a phone call from an anonymous caller who happens to be Danny. So obviously, she tells Danny to call the police. Danny calls the police. He describes his location to the police, or they triangulate his position, find out where he is. He's in Sacramento, California, 2,900 miles away, wearing a ski jacket. No, we don't know where his girlfriend lives. Obviously, she lives in Canada. Ski jacket, goggles. He had a new haircut, a new phone. Yeah, but no wallet or any ID or any money on him. So yeah, the reason I got them confused is because they're 2 cases of missing people that turn up in strange locations after going skiing. One 14 months and one 2 days. But turning up 2,900 miles away in Sacramento, California, 2 days after going missing in New York State, 2,900 miles, 60 miles an hour. That's about 48. You'd have to be traveling flat out cross country at 60 miles an hour without stopping. The
bird flies.
As a crow flies for 48 hours to get there.
That's that. Yeah, which seems unlikely. And I don't know if you guys have ever been to America. Driving around America is a nightmare.
Well, he stopped for a haircut as well.
Yeah, and doesn't remember it.
Somewhere, and doesn't remember it. And
somebody didn't call it in. Haircut.
That somebody didn't call it in about somebody coming in a ski jacket and goggles for a haircut.
That's what you think of that. I was going to say with that, and same with the other case. Where were all the witnesses? Why didn't somebody step forward and go, "Oh, you know what? He was with me," or I cut his hair. What's he talking about? Yeah, a guy with a ski jacket came in Sacramento, California, cut his hair. I'd remember that.
That's bizarre.
Let's talk about David Paulides.
Okay.
Who is he? Where did this all come from, and what do the skeptics say? Because I'm going to be very honest with you about this. I always look at what the skeptics say when I am researching something I don't know a lot about, because sometimes you get some really good stories, but also I think sometimes what the skeptics say, if the story's weak, like I did this with a lot with 9/11 and Building 7 and stuff, the skeptic story is really weak, which makes me believe the other side even more. So I think they'll say, well, that building collapsed due to fires. Really? Did it? Sort of thing. So, but then other times the skeptic story is, they come up with something believable. This is what I always say to when I did the 9/11 series, I annoyed the believers and the debunkers equally. because I went, I believe that bit, and I believe that bit, and I believe, and they both got really angry. So I've read a fair bit about the skeptical stuff, and I am a little bit skeptical about the missing 411. I will be honest with you. But if we say a little bit about David, so like we said at the start of the show, he was a police officer. He was a detective. He worked in several different fields within the police force. He was actually dismissed from the police force in 1996 after he'd been charged with a misdemeanor. He was charged with falsely soliciting as a charity and was dismissed. It's a little unclear, but it seems like later he actually appealed that and won and got his benefits back, which does make it sound like he might not have been actually guilty of that offence. But as a police officer, if you're charged with any offence, you're dismissed. So in his retirement, forced retirement, he got a big interest in Bigfoot and wrote a couple of books, self-published them, got a bit of notoriety in the area. And he was in a federal national park, and a couple of rangers sort of spotted him, knew who he was, and apparently at the end of the day came across to him and sort of said, we know who you are. I don't know if you're interested in this story, that we see a lot of missing people. And there seems to be, even though there's a lot of interest really early on, it then seems to get brushed under the carpet. And it seems to happen a lot. And these rangers had worked in several national parks across the United States. So he started looking into it. Now, obviously, the National Park Police were really helpful and never tried to block him at all. That's right, isn't it? When he asked for information and things, I was waiting for somebody to jump in and go, no, he didn't. Nobody, really?
So I don't know.
Yeah, they didn't help him at all.
No, they didn't.
They were interested.
No.
Any kind of test, they weren't remotely interested in speaking about it, is the impression I'm under, let alone helping him.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he put several of... Yeah, sorry, go on.
For a list of missing people in Yosemite Park, National Park, they wanted, I think it was $135,000.
Yeah.
And then for the entire state, they wanted, I think it was 1.6 million.
Yeah. That was their argument. That was the admin charges.
When you can go down to the local precincts.
So looking at something like 6 to 12 months before it would be released after that as well.
Yeah,
it wouldn't be a case of pay you 135 grand and here you go, Joe. Yeah. It would be a case of give us the greenbacks and we'll get to you when we get time,
Yeah,
and he's still trying to get them lists. He's spending.
And he never asked them. Well, they say they haven't got them. They say they don't record missing people.
Yeah.
Do you think there's any possibility that a national park, a national organisation, a federal organisation like that would not record if people went missing on their site? I mean, I would say just from a liability point of view, an insurance point of view, you'd write it down.
I find it completely believable that a so-called well-run organisation is completely capable of negligence. Yeah.
Mm. Oh yeah.
Yeah, but I think they keep lists of everything. I think they know how many. If you ask them how many toilet rolls they buy each month, I'm pretty sure they'd tell you. I'm pretty sure they'd have a list.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between OCD and honesty, though.
Well, that's my point.
By the same token, what you've got to remember is if they pass on them details to other people who they think are responsible for keeping those details and cataloguing those details, it's the ability to pass the blame, but don't blame me. And I think they would jump at that chance, pass it on to the police, pass it on to whichever other authority. Don't bother us. We've got to look after Yogi Bear and make sure there's plenty of honey, bunny.
Yeah, I agree. It goes up the ladder.
Yeah.
Now, see, I don't agree, because a lot of these rangers, I mean, you get some rangers that are like tree surgeons, and their job is to look after the park like that way. But then other rangers they are like police force. They are like we would have railway police in this country or something like that. They are law enforcement. Mm-hmm. That is what they do. I mean, a big part of their job is making sure people have got the right passes and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But they are police. They are federal state police. And they don't record when people go missing on a state park.
Yeah, I am a bailiff for a local for fisheries. I'm a fisheries management officer as well as a bailiff, and the land that we rent or the land that we have the fishing rights over, the people that own it, United Utilities, are not responsible for offering out the fishing licenses and not responsible for knowing who trespasses on the land. We are. So it doesn't always, responsibility doesn't always work like that. There is always somebody who's responsible for something else. They're responsible for providing people with water. They're responsible for making sure the purity is okay. And that is it. They've got a public liability in so much as, access to the land. But even that, they pass that responsibility off onto us and we're supposed to deal with it. I think, if responsibility can be passed on by anybody in a position of authority, they will do it. So it's not beyond the realms of comprehension.
It was their responsibility. That's my point, though. That they are a police force. They are called the National Park Police. They are supposed to be law enforcement. It was their jurisdiction.
What you're saying is they should have it, but they haven't got it. So to substantiate your theory, they should have it and they haven't. So by very definition,
that's what I'm saying. They're coming up with every excuse not to share it.
Are they lying about it, or have they ever had it? You're coming down to semantics. If they don't bring it forward or they don't produce it, then does it exist? Did they ever keep it?
If they don't have it, the police or FBI would, because the cases will inevitably end up going through the park police to the real police and onto the FBI. In some of the cases. So the records are there, aren't they, at the FBI and the actual police, because they have to make reports because that's part of their protocol.
You've also got to look at the remit of what their job is as a police officer, do you know what I mean? And what sort of like laws they got. I mean, if you get police community support officers in the UK, they've got the same powers of arrest as a regular citizen. I'm led to believe they don't have the same powers of arrest as a police officer.
No, they don't.
Even though ostensibly they're working for the same body. But they don't have them same powers of arrest.
Mm-hmm.
So
no, they don't.
I know
it comes under a similar sort of power to arrest that I would have. That I could, in theory, lock somebody who's committed a crime. You're in very dangerous territory though if you do that. The way I understand this, these are police, so they are law enforcement. They have a similar right to similar legal rights as like a sheriff. In a small town in America. And you got to remember that the police, the way America is policed, particularly in the Western states, is very different to how we do it here. And so, but I would say they're still reporting these crimes. So even if they're not keeping a list of like a file, an evidence file, they should still have a list of people they've reported. Shouldn't they?
They're still that's the key word there, is that they're reporting, they're passing the information on to everybody else. Even with the police, the drug squad won't necessarily have all the information regarding murders and stuff like that, because there'll be a homicide squad, there'll be different departments for this. And even though they, like you said, they are police, that type of thing would be passed on to missing persons or whatever other department, whether it's at a state level, a county level, or something like that. So I can understand why they've done it. I'm not saying that they shouldn't. I agree with you. Why shouldn't they and why haven't they? But I can understand why they might think themselves, well, we don't need to do it. It's not our responsibility. We pass it on to X, Y, or Z department. I mean, I agree with you. They should. But I can understand why they haven't and they don't,
In my job, I work in social services. I don't necessarily keep a file for every customer I have, but I do record it. If I report something to somebody else, I have to make a record of it. I might not then have a record of what is done about it. I might not have a record of the resolution, but I have a record that I made a referral, that I reported something. That's what I'm saying. These guys are saying they haven't even got a record of them reporting it. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. The FBI in 2019 said that they had 609,000 cases of missing persons in the United States that were opened, and just over 607,000 cases closed. So that means there are 2,000 cases in America every year where somebody's reported missing and then never seen again. So these records do exist. There's just a debate on why the national parks don't seem to have those records or to have those lists.
I think, as it says, one of our guests mentioned, it's not good for tourism to publicise the death statistics when people go missing, essentially, in your your parks. It's not good for business.
Yeah, that is a good point that Nelly makes there as well, though, actually, that missing person cases aren't treated like a criminal offence. Particularly America, it's not seen as a criminal activity because you have the right to disappear if you want to. So that's why they don't even look for you for 24 hours unless there's some sort of evidence of foul play. So the missing person cases aren't treated the same way. A policeman doesn't want to think, I'm going to waste hours digging into this and trying to find somebody, and just to find out he's started off with his girlfriend for the weekend, you know. And
you've also got the fact that if a body does turn up and they suspect anything's gone wrong, then a different department will take over anyway, not the state park rangers. It will then become the remit of, like I say, homicide or somebody like that. FBI.
A murder at a federal state park would be federal, an FBI agent.
Yeah, federal police.
So, but he was refused several freedom of information requests for information. So he had to piece together information over years by basically speaking to the witnesses himself. So I looked at what the skeptics said. I found this Skeptical Inquirer 2017, Kyle Pollock. And the thing I found really interesting was even the skeptics are there going, Pollock, yes. Even the skeptics are there going, the cases are genuine. We know the cases are genuine. We can't find any major discrepancies in anything that David Plady says or claims. But they have the argument basically is that nothing to see here. It's all fine. It's just normal cases. Any possibility, do you think?
No.
Go on, sorry.
That he happens to find patterns in, some of the patterns he's finding. It's just, it's. I don't know.
He goes on about berry bushes quite a lot, doesn't he?
Yes, berries.
A lot of the bodies are found by berries and things. That's an unusual thing to note, I think.
Or kids are fed berries by a wolf man or a bear man, or.
Can I just with the two park rangers going up to him, Pilatus was already working on missing 411 cases, as far as I'm aware.
Oh, was he? Oh, that's. Yeah. I listened to an interview with him today, literally, and he didn't say that.
No.
Well, that was coming from his words, so I'm a bit confused. I literally listened to an interview of him today, where he said that's where he started. He'd already been working on Bigfoot, which is why I think a lot of the confusion comes from that he believes Bigfoot's doing this, because he wrote a couple of books on Bigfoot, but he's actually never said that.
No,
he says that he believes there's some sort of supernatural story. He doesn't believe this is man, but he doesn't think it's things. But I stand corrected. But I listened to the interview today, and that's what he said in the interview. So I don't know. Shall we talk about the theories then? Because have we all got theories on what is causing this? Go on then. Well, I've started with the first one is it's aliens, because it's always freaking aliens. I don't believe this for a second, but there are lots of theories out there that it is. One of them, my favorite, is that our government has got a secret deal with the aliens that are visiting us. In exchange for technology, we give them people. I don't think we should spend very long on this, because I think it's nonsense myself. But
would you put it past your government to sell out its own people, though? I wouldn't.
Exactly.
Well, do I think we may have
my question will be this, right? If they could travel through dimension, time, space, however, whether it's in physical or interdimensional, transdimensional, do they really need to ask the permission of anybody? What is far below their intelligence level, development level? Do they even need to give away their secrets in a tit for tat kind of deal? Really?
No, exactly.
I doubt that very much. We don't give cows a lawnmower to get as much grass as they want in exchange for eating a few of the calves. It doesn't work like that. That's just absolutely. Like, when people say that this, we swap people for technology. Really, I'm pretty sure if they wanted to take people, they'd just do it.
Exactly, and I'd argue that they possibly are, but it's got nothing to do with the missing 411 for me. Or it might do, but it's got nothing to do with it. If aliens were taking people, though, would this kind of make sense that they would do it in these isolated places?
Yes. Well, yeah, you just answered it. Yes, it's away from cities, it's away from lights, it's away from lots of other people seeing the abduction, because you're generally in rural areas and generally secluded, and occasionally there might be the odd witness to it, but quite often there's not any witnesses at all, are there?
You said the thing is you would also like argue that it's like so they just float around on the off chance that in a remote area that somebody's just going to happen by at some stage.
I'm sure
as well, they hang around there for a little bit and think, well, we've been here 6 weeks, nobody's walked past, we'll try again next week, we'll come back, I don't know, but the alien thing, it holds very little water for me.
I think
sorry. I was gonna say the way they just disappear does seem like there's maybe some sort of supernatural element, or I mean, another one is dimensions, and people talk about beings that are able to travel between dimensions, and some people have talked about our next. So we're going to talk about Bigfoot in a second. Sasquatch. That Sasquatch is actually an interdimensional alien species. Does it make any sense again? I mean, it is an argument that people literally walk around a corner and just disappear.
Yeah. One of the other things that you need to sort of make a note on as well is that when these people go missing, it's all different circumstances, For instance, there was, I can't remember any names or anything like that, but there was 2 people on a trail. One stopped to tie his shoelace up or something mundane like that, looked up, could see his friend or his partner just going over the verge of his horizon, not very far away. And when he got there, he shouted to say, like, wait up. No response whatsoever. And that is also another characteristic. Yeah. So the people are gone. And when I say gone, I mean that they're taken. Their mind is gone before they even realize it. Yeah. So for me, it is some sort of different dimension that they're slipping into, a portal, a time rift. It has to be something like that. There's reports of.
Again, when I get the chance, can I just address that statement about President Eisenhower's daughter? I will say this again. I'm not wishing to pick on cows. By the way, I'll just use them as an example. We don't randomly go and chase wild cows around in the field. We breed them deliberately for a purpose. We harvest them in specific areas in manufacturing plants. There's a system in place to do so. Had that deal, and if that was true, I'm fairly sure they would also have them kind of things in place. I don't think that they would just randomly pick somebody up and think they'll do for now. Even the Nazis during the Second World War were conducting experiments along specific lines to find out information about genetics, whether it was twins, people with hyperchromia, whatever it's called, when they've got the different eye colors and things like that. I just don't think it would be random. So even had that deal been taken place, and if it is true, I think there would be a totally different system for harvesting. It's a lot more sinister and subsidious than insidious than people are making out, which is where people are bred deliberately
there is the
for the alien races.
So. Maybe the aliens.
Could you actually say that
permission?
It isn't,
maybe they would. Go on, Steve.
That it isn't random. Where David Paulides has brought up these different connections, like so many different clusters of German people going missing, different education levels, different illnesses, or like learning difficulties of things like that, or whatever. So maybe it isn't random. Maybe it is selected in a way.
But we're saying, but why would you ask the government, or why would the aliens come here and have anything to do with that government? Wouldn't. Maybe that's the reason why, though, is because there is a planned, organized things that they actually come here and they haven't asked permission. They come here and said, we're taking this many people, and we want your help to do it.
The thing is a common link between the mystery doesn't prove the existence of aliens as being the cause or being the culprit. No matter how many times people say, well, they do have this, and they've all got shoes missing, or the shoes are taken off. Do aliens only want people in bare feet? You know, where do you draw the line in what you use as the parameters as your controlled study group for the experiment you're conducting as an alien civilization? So just to say, well, they've all got the same blood group, or they've all got this, they've all got that it was aliens in the slightest. It just proves that it's one of the confines of the remit of the like David Paulides has set out, and what is just the course that this mystery has taken, not that aliens have spawned. I'm not sold on it being alien.
No, not at all, really. No. It's one of the ones that comes up because it's always aliens. I'm sure if somebody could blame Nazis for this, they would, because it's always aliens or Nazis. That always makes the cornerstone of every good conspiracy. But in this case, I don't think it. Other than this thing about how people can literally just walk around the corner and seemingly disappear. That's the only bit for me that sort of goes, I don't know how that can be. That could be some sort of alien thing. Other than that, doesn't make any sense. So let's go on down quick. This is another one that people talk about a lot, Bigfoot. I think this link comes a lot because David Paulides has obviously got an interest in Bigfoot. It's one of the reasons why he was in national parks in the first place. He's got a fascination with it. So we know there's been witnesses, like you said, Dave, your story earlier. People, very hairy people seen with kids over their shoulders running up hills. And it seems to be that where there are large concentrations of missing people is also the same areas that there's large concentrations of Bigfoot sightings and Sasquatch sightings.
Clusters.
What do we think? Possible?
I think given the areas where sorry, Damien, the Bigfoot are spotted in these areas because it's wilderness. Humans are encroaching more upon that wilderness as more parks are being created or extended. So it's not a massive surprise that they're going to be spotted in the same area. It's not a huge leap. You know, if you want to go exploring, there's not many frontiers left. The space, yes. The Marianas Trench, yes. The depths of the oceans, yes. On land, not so many. A lot of the frontiers have been breaking many years ago during the Victorian era, sort of pushed them boundaries away, and there's very few of them. There's very few of them left. If you want to disappear somewhere, you know, people will queue on on Everest to climb it. At one time, you would get a select few. It would be a massive expedition per year. Now it's like a tourism. There's like 300 people lined up waiting.
Photos at the top where it's like covered in trash.
I mean, it's ridiculous.
It's like over the top of Mount Everest.
It's like from being like, we'll climb it because it's there. It's like, you know what, I fancy a bit of an holiday, darling. Let's go to the roof of the world. Well, it's the same thing in a lot of these areas. I mean, if you look at the demographics of that released by the Bigfoot Research Organization of where a lot of these sightings are taking place, which incidentally are type 1 patties, they're known as patties, the type 1 Bigfoot. You've got in Washington State and a lot of them in Canada. And there's lots of different types of Bigfoot as well in the USA. I mean, 4 main recognized types that are profligate throughout the USA that have specific demographics in their own right, dependent upon the topography and the type of land that there is. And it just so happens that the areas where these type 1 patties are mainly seen in the USA is the types of areas where these national parks are, where people can go on these trails, where there's these creek beds and there's this kind of topography. And I think it's just by happenstance more than the fact that is any definitive proof that Bigfoot are responsible for taking people. If you speak to a cryptozoologist, there is a division between people who think that the missing link between mankind and aliens is the interdimensional beings, but for the most part, any serious cryptozoologist or any pseudoscientist would attribute them to being, a descendant of either Australopithecus, Deinopithecus, they're seen as being very real physical beings. The few elements of evidence that are found suggest them to be a physical being. When even hair where the DNA has been lost because it's been over time, so it's contaminated and they won't use it, is still hair. The footprints are still there. The video footage or bits of video footage that we see suggest that the physical beings, the hairy beings, they'll do weavings, they'll do the knocking, the whooping, all suggests a physical being that, if it was interdimensional, wouldn't need to give itself away by leaving footprints or by bending trees and knocking on wood. So the Bigfoot thing for me just completely falls through the floor as well. Again, I don't think it's as simple as aliens or Bigfoot stealing people and doing weird things to them. I think it's something far more sinister or far weirder than that. I don't think it's quite that simple, unfortunately.
Very much.
Well, let's get into that then. So what do you think it is then?
I think it's alien Bigfoots. It's not just aliens. It's not Bigfoots. It's alien Bigfoot. It's Bigfoots from another planet.
Race of alien, extraterrestrial Bigfoot.
Have to bear in mind as well.
Extraterrestrial Sasquatch. There we go. That's it.
Yeah.
That David Paulides has also now taken an interest into Skinwalker Ranch as well, for the same reason of these portal things and things like that have been witnessed as well. So. And if you're going to talk about anywhere on the world, interesting, anywhere in the world where every single thing that you could think of that would appear in Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World back in the day, or any kind of weird, all happens at the Skinwalker Ranch. Every single thing, you've got like these. It does though, doesn't it? You got these weird.
Yep.
You've got these
televised on the History Channel.
You've got the UFOs, you've got Bigfoots, feets, fats, whatever you want to call them. You've got all sorts of things going on in this one area. So it doesn't surprise me at all that the parameters of his controlled study group that are propagating his theories regarding 411 are constantly moving. Because how many cases throughout history? I can add two just off the top of my head that might as well be considered 411. And one of them is Madeleine McCann. You can throw her in the mix for a start. She's disappeared, no evidence. And the other one,
earlier.
Yeah,
they figured
Madeleine
her
McCann.
out, though, didn't they? Now, Madeleine McCann.
Yeah, about the German guy.
Was it Brock? Lars Brock,
doesn't he?
Brock, Lars? I don't know.
I think Les Brock is a wrestler. But,
He is, isn't he?
Elisa Lam.
That's another word.
Elisa Lam. They've no idea how she died. Again, she was found in the water tank on top of the Cecil Hotel for our American friends there. In the Cecil Hotel with the clothes off to one side, and no idea how she got into the water tank. And on top of which, search dogs had looked for her, as you mentioned before, Jamie, and then followed her or managed to get her to where the window was, and then lost her for no reason. So certain parameters about what would be considered a 411 case, same kind of thing. She disappears, don't find her for 17 days, turns up in a water tank, dead, clothes off to one side, yada yada yada. There's other extraneous features that surround that case, but ostensibly, if you're going to go off the way that the David Paulides has sort of made these parameters of what makes a 411 case so malleable, you can add it into that as being a possible 411 case.
In the UK, they reckon we're second in the world for missing cases. People just going missing and being found again. And we get 176,000 last year missing cases. Yeah. But 99% of those cases are eventually resolved one way or another. It's just like I said there. But I think you're saying there's a point earlier that we've encroached into the wilderness. In England, on average, you're never more than 5 miles from a McDonald's, and which is just you can go wandering in the hills, and I think people have lower expectations of risks. Halfway. Yeah, there's always a cafe there, isn't there? But people have lower expectations of risk nowadays. I generally went to Ben Nevis a couple of years ago, and I'm wearing all the my proper gear because I know what Ben Nevis can be like. It is a mountain after all. And some idiot walked past me in trainers and in jeans, and I'm thinking, you're going to die.
There you go.
You know what I mean? I do think there's an element of
selection.
Yeah, exactly. Just skipping up in your pair of Nikes, you moron.
Somebody come out with all sorts of theory to quantify what they're talking about. You've just got to look at Amphier Liath Moore, okay, the grey man of Scotland, and you look at which is Ben Macdui. It's his second highest peak in not just in Scotland but in the UK. It's like one time fair dues. However, there's people all over that place now, the Spey Valley. If there was anything even remotely knocking about in such an inhospitable place, ostensibly speaking, it would be seen by all these bleeding tourists that are walking around in jeans, as you've just said. You know, and people won't look at the prosaic explanations for what might go on. And I know we're talking about 411, which is, you know, it's a mystery, isn't it? But you know, the broken spectre syndrome, infrasounds. There's lots of reasons why people might see something, but they'll still propagate the myth of there being a big grey man living in Ben Macdui in Scotland. Yeah, but you fly over the UK, and it's farming. There's very few places of, you know, even the great woods, like Kielder and, you know, stuff. They're pretty well monitored. They're looked after by the Forestry Commission. There isn't many places where we don't know about. Mankind is encroaching more and more and more upon the wilderness. It really is. It really is that simple. It's
you see,
that's what makes it weird, Jamie. That's what makes it so wild.
You know, but you see maps of America and like the difference between the populated areas from the 1960s to today. America has gone from about 30% populated to 60%. There's only 40% of the area that somebody doesn't live in, basically. Even images of Brazil. We're hacking the rainforest down. There's very little wildlife. You know, there's nothing like what it was 50 years ago. We're encroaching and building towns and cities everywhere. And that's one of my big problems with us, that we've never proved Bigfoot, that if Bigfoot exists, where is
You've got to talk about the cave systems as well, but because David Pilaris has come out with this map of Bigfoot sightings, the missing 411 clusters and the cave systems, and they go extremely well together.
You can almost overlap them. Maybe the cave systems, maybe a lot of the clusters in the East Coast, where you are talking about Yosemite and places like that, though there's not as much cave system. But they're definitely the ones on the West Coast. They're definitely the ones on the East Coast. You could overlap them. It's like tracing paper. Where the cave systems are is where these bloody these clusters seem to be for the 411 cases.
Right, which possibly suggests that something that can move move a child or an adult human with relative ease, perhaps who's scared of humans and stays away from us because we're quite hostile. We've probably killed a lot of them off over their encroaching on their land over time. It's quite possible, isn't it, that there is something that we don't know about that exists, perhaps living in cave systems away from us. But then we're encroaching more and more, and that's when these people start going missing. Maybe.
Exactly, yeah, Loch Ness. She just sits.
I think, and I do think some of the cases, like the two cases I said about the two guys that went missing 14 months and two days, there was no sightings of Bigfoot, Sasquatch, or any kind of creature taking them. So in those type of cases, I'm leaning more towards some kind of. But the fact that they don't remember the entire period of time. Maybe they've had the one that was gone for 14 months. Maybe he had a split personality flip, just lost his original personality and just flipped to another personality for 14 months, lived a completely different life, managed to get off the ski resort and somewhere, and then just hop around the country for 14 months, maybe. Or maybe it's to do with parallel dimensions and beings coming through portals, or you can't even rule out aliens when time dilation's involved, because that's quite a common occurrence with abductees. But then I wouldn't say that fits the bill for Martin case, not at all, where the Key family saw an ape-like creature that behaved like a man and carried something under an arm, which a bear can't do with a claw. Or over your shoulder. Yeah. That's.
You see, you got the ultimate get out, haven't you?
I've seen Yogi Bear with a picnic basket on his shoulder, mate. I've seen it.
You do.
So
You dispel natural sciences. You do away with general science, natural science, and Newtonian physics. What you're left with is quantum physics, string theory, and chaos theory. And when you understand that can actually walk parallel with a lot of what's going on and explain what a lot can go on regarding vibrational frequencies and energies, then every single thing that we're talking about potentially becomes possible and indeed very probable. So, you can have the ultimate get out by just saying, well, quantum physics could be anything whatsoever, we don't know. Time travelers, it could be time travelers. Aliens indeed time I mean, this has been put forward for God knows how many different cases now, hasn't it? Coming back in time, it's ourselves from the future coming back in time. Are we missing elements of ourselves in the future, which means we need to come back and harvest people to collect DNA from our ancestors being us now in the present, as it were? Where'd you go with it? You can to and fro it, so you can bounce it around all over the place like a ping pong ball.
Genetics. You just made me think of that evolutionary thought process where if you think about what we look like in the future when we start becoming more spacefaring. Yeah, and we'd start, well, all right, we're in space, so there's not much light, so your eyes probably get bigger because you need to capture more light the longer you live out there in space. Your bone density goes, your muscles shrink because you don't need any of it to move in 0G, so you start losing all of your muscle mass, so you start becoming quite spindly.
Yeah.
Your brain probably evolves because that's the muscle that you are still using a lot and you're thinking a lot rather than doing any physical stuff, so your head gets bigger, and suddenly you're starting to look like a grey.
Yeah, suddenly, like you say, because of whatever might happen. No, man, I'm rocking it.
Did it, didn't they?
because of whatever kind of thing happens as well, you end up with more pollution in the sky, so there's less sunlight, so you change pallor in your skin colouring, as you said. You don't need to reproduce anymore because you're doing it all with genetics instead of sexual intercourse and regular procreation. So the sex organs diminish and devolve. So before say you are quite literally Roger from American Dad or something like that. You're living in somebody's basement in 8,000 years' time.
Or Paul. I quite like some of the things Paul says in that film. I think it's great. Agent Mulder. I came up with Agent Mulder.
Yeah,
they've been drip feeding me pictures of me, so if we ever meet, you don't pass out. All right.
Yeah.
And I actually think that's possibly what they've been doing through movie and film for the last 60, 70 years, probably.
Yeah, 100%. Of course I have.
Anyway, this is a completely different topic to these cases, really, isn't it? Because I don't really think that it's likely that aliens are involved in any of these, to be honest. I think possible that some kind of humanoid might be involved, some kind of unknown creature that we don't know of its existence, possibly. But it's not definite.
Is it possible that some of these cases where people just seem to disappear, they just seem to walk around a corner and go poof, gone? There could be elements of science and physics. It's perfectly possible
just had a donation
that we just don't
there, by the way, Jamie.
Understand.
Have a look at you.
Oh, amazing!
You just had the donation,
dude. You're my first one, so thank you very much.
Hey!
I appreciate it. Super sticker. Well done. I look like a very nice morning shrimp too. But is there an element of science, wormholes, time dilations? Because we talk about a lot of these things around large rock fields and large periods of large areas of granite and stuff. Is there potentially something that's perfectly natural, but a science we don't necessarily understand?
Possibly, yes. I do really think that. I think the electromagnetism and the unification with gravity isn't there yet in the current understanding, I suppose, of physics. And it does need to somehow improve. And these areas that you're saying where was it Yosemite, that's the massive granite boulder field, where if that creates some kind of difference in the electromagnetic field that exists, essentially. Yeah, it could be. Maybe is it creating some kind of portal or rift in space time that's then allowing things to travel? I don't know. It's an interesting thought, though.
It's like we always say that, isn't it? As soon as you understand that quantum entanglement is true and a thing, everything's on the table after that.
Yeah.
It's just like that's evil magic, so everything's on the table. And that is a perfectly scientifically, reasonably scientifical. I just made a word up.
In the middle of that sentence, probably not the best choice.
Yeah, exactly. But a perfectly scientifically accurate thing that happens, and we don't necessarily understand it, but maybe it explains some of these events where people just seem to disappear, and reappear, and that's the big problem for me. And that I don't know. Oh, I have these pretty messages. Sorry, that's the big thing I don't understand for me is when these cases of somebody, they walk literally be just down the road. They'll just be a few paces in front of their friend. Their friend will turn around, turn back, and they're gone. How do we explain that without talking about something pretty exotic? Because they didn't sort of go behind a tree and run off or hide under a bush or something. Not in every case, anyway. So how do we line those two things up? And maybe that's where it starts getting into the supernatural.
Maybe the glitches in the Matrix.
Time storms, possibly.
Time storms.
Yeah. Now there's an author. I can't remember her name. Dave knows her or knows of her. Jill. Oh, what's her bloody name? Where is it? Where's the book? I've got the book. Here we go. Sorry, Jenny Randall's Time Storms. So
Jenny Randall, yeah.
That book. She a lot of what I've only read a little bit. I've not had time to read it all. I've had it fucking bloody ages. Pardon French. But she looks at these like some of the 411 cases, they'll have things like mist and bad weather will set in, and this mist will be a localized area, or glimmers. You know, like you're seeing like a shimmering effect again, but only select areas, and other weird things like that. And she looks at it from a scientific point of view, and a scientific point of view only. She doesn't look at it in any paranormal sort of way at all. So again, that sort of leads to the maybe is it portal like or different dimensions and things like that. So
and like Bazza says there, that this might be, I said it's supernatural, but I think I mean by that it's beyond what we sort of consider. I think the words, you know, when we say pseudoscience, I hate that term, because so much in pseudoscience actually is just science we don't quite grasp yet.
Yeah.
So maybe this is the same thing. It is completely natural. We just don't completely understand it.
Yeah, you've obviously got to develop hypotheses, haven't you, on the fringe of science, and then try and test them. And yeah, you still got.
Well, that's what propagates science, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
I think a lot of science starts with imagination.
Pseudoscience is not peer reviewed. That's pretty much it. You don't have a controlled study group that you replicate in certain conditions and certain parameters within that controlled study group, and it's not peer reviewed. There isn't papers wrote on it. So because of that, it's pseudoscience. But this is where it all starts.
It's a dirty
people
word,
on the
though,
outside of
it?
it and pushing it. It is a dirty word, you know. But there's lots of words that are dirty. So is politics. I don't like that one.
True.
But you can only play cards with hands that you dealt, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of pseudoscientists end up being proven right in the future, though.
A lot don't, though, as well.
A lot don't.
Oh, yeah.
A lot don't.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, I'm just thinking of Graham Hancock, who must be laughing these days when they've starting to prove his theories about an ancient lost civilized culture not being so silly after all.
Yeah.
That one that Amy Hall comment has just said. 411 case again. It was a couple, and I think again it stopped for a second, and his partner carried on going and just vanished, completely vanished, and they was both walking up and down the same trail, shouting at each other and things like that. Couldn't see each other, and eventually, I don't know how long a time had passed, but eventually one of them was walking back down the trail, and his friend just walked around the corner going, "Oh my God, I've been shouting you, I've been looking for you, I've been on the same trail." "Yeah, I've been on the same trail as well." "Well, you couldn't have been because I was here." "Well, I was here." You vanished. And you know, bizarre, just totally bizarre.
Almost like an electromagnetic field caused a split in time, and they followed two different timelines almost. The timelines split at some point.
They're out of phase with each other.
Yeah.
I think a favourite Star Trek tool, ever so slightly out of phase.
Another casualty that can be added to the 411 list is this panel's ability tonight to pronounce people's names has been atrocious.
I
haven't mispronounced any names.
I'm not having it. I still can't say Pilates. I'm saying
you can't say
David's
surname right, can you? It's David Polides, isn't it?
Pilates.
Pilates. Pilates. It's a bit like yoga.
You're making me do it wrong now, I swear.
Pilates.
I can't say names. I tell you what, when we did like anything on China, as soon as we're doing a subject that's like anything to do with anything like Asia or anything like that, I'm like, oh man.
I generally pronounce the names.
Yeah, I'm just useless at it. I get just deceived. But yeah, I'll put my hands up to that. I'm useless at it. I actually was listening to Mr. Ballon earlier, and I kept repeating David Pilates. I still can't say it. David Pilates. David Pilates. David Pilates. And I still can't get it right. So,
Paul.
Okay.
It's Paul, isn't it? And then is it? Did you pronounce it Edes or Ades at the end? Pilates or Edes? Pilates. So even though it's not an A sound, it Pilates. Okay.
Damien, what's your chair made out of? What's your chair made out of?
I don't know. What make is it?
What make
Please
is it?
tell me the make. I don't know. GT Player.
There you go. Happy days. There you go, Nelly. Available from all good Amazon.
Yeah. Amazon's
next
day special.
Not sponsored, by the way. Not sponsored.
Not this day. If anybody wants to sponsor us, so I'd be sponsored by anybody.
Other online shops are available.
So we're going to get into the last little run of this, though. But I still think Dave has got an idea on what he thinks is going on here, and he's not quite shared it with us yet.
Nah.
No.
No.
I
think
haven't.
You don't know.
Go on.
Dave.
Yeah, Dave.
What?
I don't know. You seemed to hint earlier that you sort of had an idea, or you at least know what it isn't. Then
the things that separate all the different, the different matters. You solids, liquids, gases. We're really talking about vibrational frequencies. For the most part, we're talking about amounts, availabilities. To move from one state to another is about the component molecules and the oscillation at the frequency at which they move and the density at which they're propagated. And when certain conditions are in effect where that state can be affected upon or acted upon by another outside energy that can change that vibrational frequency, then that matter or that particular state is no longer the state that it started off in. I think because of this can be responsible for all the things that we can't understand and accept now, for different types of travel, for invisibility, for transdimensional and interdimensional travel, is states, the state that we are in, the frequency that we vibrate as human beings, the frequencies that all of the matter vibrates is different than our own. But when you change state, you can change everything, where it's all about its molecular structure and vibration. And I think certain parameters come into existence when conditions are right, and everybody's almost hinted at it by saying things like dimensional rifts or portals or things like that. On investigations I've seen, also my own belief system and the way that I was raised, but which I'm not going to go into, but on paranormal investigations, when you can see a physical object collide with another physical object and instead of being destroyed, become absolved and completely disappear and then reappear in another part of the building, completely intact again. You sort of physicality isn't as physical as we like to think.
No,
I think there's a lot of physicists who are also.
It's space. If you understand just the atomic structure, don't you? electrons orbiting a nucleus. 99.99% of everything is nothing.
Is emptiness,
But yet you have a physical present matter. But really, it equals mc squared. So you're just energy. You see, matter is just energy on a slow enough vibration to have a physical presence. I do like what you're saying to some extent, Dave. I do like to think of everything as being about frequencies and about vibrations and energy. But how do people just change what state from solid matter into what gaseous plasma? What's happening? That's what I don't really understand about it.
I think it's staying as they are per se, but just at a different vibrational frequency, where the what's needed to stay as matter at this particular dimension is relative to the confines of this dimension. In another dimension, it's different set of frequencies, so different things are needed. You will tune into a certain set of frequencies. So we are running at, say, just for an example, I'm just plucking a number out of the area. Our base frequency within this universe, say, for instance, might be 400 megahertz. That's just a random number. On a parallel universe of another universe, it might be 500 megahertz. So water doesn't need to be 50 megahertz like it does here. It needs to be 60 megahertz there, but it's still water, and it still has its own construct there because it's vibrating at a different vibrational frequency within that field. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Which is a different field than what we exist in here.
Yeah, and so what the person sort of walking through the walking through the wilderness is walking through these perhaps weird electromagnetic fields, Jamie, caused by a lot of granite, and they're then altering their state, their frequency, and they're slipping out of this dimension and appearing in a parallel universe, perhaps. Because of
when you look at things like Project Rainbow and the Montauk Project and the Philadelphia experiment and things like that, which can be laughed at and poo-pooed with the USS Eldridge and stuff, when it does reappear back in its own time, because the vibrational shift and the way that the Earth has moved upon its axis, you can explain why it wouldn't happen, because the USS Eldridge would actually be out in space somewhere, because when it came back, the Earth would no longer be in this position.
The Earth moves about 12,000 miles an hour. Space.
So this USS destroyer should be out in the middle, or should be where the moon is, or whatever. But if you take on board the fact that they could understand that phase shift regarding the physicality of the shift, because the ship, because they understood where it needed to be in retrospect to that, the ship itself within itself does not move. However, the crew members can independently on board the ship. Whilst the car is moving, you can still move around, independent of the fact that the car is moving. The car stays constant, and even if the car stays still, you can still move within the car. So what happens then is, when the USS Eldridge arrives back at the time that it should be at, the crew are stuck inside the bulkheads, because whilst the ship has stayed a constant, they have been moving around on the ship as an independent motion, so an independent vibrational frequency within the vibrational frequency of the ship. So they've been stuck in the bulkheads, they've been stuck inside the matter and all the rest of it. So none of this, of course, explains the fact that these people are found naked, but the people that are found naked, maybe that's a completely different situation than the people who disappear entirely and never come back.
I do think there's an argument to say that there's probably lots of different things going on here as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I think sometimes some of these things that are being attributed to the 4-1. The case I had with little Bobby, I suspect that was nothing weird about that. I think he probably wandered off. He saw something. He fell. He got hurt. The scavengers and killed probably, and the scavengers went for his body. That's one of the reasons why I sort of picked that story, because I actually don't think there's anything that amazing about it. But then other stories obviously are weird. The thing you're saying about the Philadelphia...
You're 84-year-old though.
Yeah. I don't think the Philadelphia experiment happened. I don't think it did. I think it was a magnetic test about minesweeping and things, and there's just this story's created. But that's just my personal opinion. But if it did happen, and it was, I've always wondered if and time travel is a similar thing. If it's interdimensional, it is maybe going out of phase, like you said. We don't know that it's still anchored to a point.
Correct.
So it could be anchored to, because there's one of the things they talk about dimensions.
Wavy
lines.
They
say there's like 12 dimensions. Wavy lines. Yeah. There's like 12 dimensions or something. But and then that's sort of like proven in a way. But one of the things they are discussed is that they think gravity is much, much weaker because it potentially bleeds through the dimensions. So gravity should be as strong as the other two magnetic forces, but it's not. It's much, much weaker. And then they say one reason for that is it may be even throughout the dimensions. So maybe if an object leaves one dimension and goes to another, it can hold its position. It's like anchored to the Earth in a way.
Yeah.
Because of the gravity. So there's lots of reasons why it wouldn't get potentially left behind. It could be dragged along with the planet.
Yeah.
But personally, I'd say I don't think the Philadelphia experiment was anything. I think that's just one of these myths that's grown.
Well, look into when it came about.
Yeah, I have done.
All your questions.
I researched it a couple of
that
years
should be
ago.
enough for you. Yeah. When you realise when it came into being. Sorry,
Yeah.
go on. Yeah, like
A
Duncan
lot of the
Cameron and
eyewitnesses
people.
where the story comes from, the eyewitnesses are very dodgy. And the stories changed over years and things like this. And
that's all you ever need. When you can pin it down to when the actual story come about and how it come about, is like,
exactly.
Okay, you know, yeah.
It's fascinating with it. But okay.
Like women's rights in Afghanistan.
Yeah. But going back to the 411 though, and you're talking about this phasing thing.
Spot on though, isn't it? Suddenly became a big issue at one point, didn't it? Just before we invaded and occupied.
Yeah, we don't really give a crap now. It's amazing though, people will change their moral principle depending on a situation. I think personally the Saudi Arabians have a terrible human rights record, but I'm a Man United supporter and I'd quite like the Saudi royal family to buy Man United, and you'd be amazing how quickly I'm willing to dismiss all of their human rights violations. If they put 4 billion quid into my club, I'm okay with it. So happy days.
All the money they've made off all the oil they've sold you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'll take that. But to go back to the 411 though, so is that why do you think then it's focused in certain areas? Because then again, there's this phasic thing happening, maybe there's some things happening in physics, and they're linked to certain areas, and maybe that's one of the reasons why these areas are wilderness and we don't necessarily build cities there. And could this be linked to a lot of ley lines and things like that as well? Could these all things?
I think energy fields can be responsible. I think it can be a mixture of that. I also think it can be a mixture of people just going missing because they're abducted and signs just aren't left behind, and these people are murdered.
Yeah,
Keith Bennett's body still hasn't been found. The only evidence they had was that he disappeared, and then Myra Hindley opening her mouth.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. There was no evidence had been taken. There was no sighting. His body hasn't been found. He just disappeared. It does happen. It happens a lot. It happens
right now
all
in America,
the time, you know.
Right now in America, they estimate there's about 30 serial killers that are active. In the late 80s, the height of it was they estimated anything up to 100 serial killers are active in the United States.
I just don't think it's impossible to assume that a great deal of the cases, although there isn't physical evidence there, they've just been, especially given the age of a lot of the cases as well in the 50s and 60s, where there wasn't the same degree of criminal forensics. A lot of these people have been taken. There's been no sign left of them. They've been killed. They've been buried a long way away.
Mm-hmm.
And that's massively unfortunate and really traumatic for the families.
Yeah.
But, you know, and I think it's a mix of reasons why people are going missing.
Yeah.
I think so. And for me, I read about David Bledisy, and I do look at why he was dismissed from the police, and it's not really neither here nor there, but it sounds like he was doing something he shouldn't have been doing for money. He then wrote books on Bigfoot. He then seems to have hit on something. He seems to me to be very clever. That he's very careful not to sort of shout aliens, even though he implies supernatural reasons quite a lot. He never actually says it because he knows a large number of his people would dismiss him. He's sort of very clever in that way. He talks a lot about being a detective, even though some things have questioned his police career. That is maybe not quite as exciting as he's made out.
People are always going to say crap, though, aren't they?
They're interesting
People
stories,
always say
though.
crap, yeah. But even the skeptics say these stories are genuine. They're genuine.
Yeah, I
think if you can respect somebody for the work they do, but it doesn't mean they're squeaky clean just because you like what they do. You know, I don't feel the need to defend David Paulides just because of the work that he's doing. If he's been dodgy in the past, he's been dodgy. That's just it. That's it. People change. People can change. People do change. Should he be judged upon what he's doing now? Absolutely. Of course he should. However, you know, it's like if your character can be called into question, it will always be there. The fact that you've done certain things, you've acted a certain way, you never truly move on from it, and especially when you're in the public eye. And I think he understands that. He knows that when you're in the public eye, everything becomes public. Does it detract from what he's doing now? No. Should why he's doing or the reasons why he's doing what he's doing now be called into question? Also, probably no. Is he doing it because his career was cut short, yet he still feels that need for mystery and intrigue? Like he was a police officer.
Yeah. One of the things I did sort of question about him when I was listening to the interview about him today was he talked about he's put Freedom of Information Act requests in, and he made the point of saying, I'm a published author, so I wanted to waive the fees. And they turned around and said, no, because your books aren't in enough libraries. So they said, on this interview, they argued, that's not a thing. You're a published author. So that's it. That's the end of it. It's not quite true, though, because he was a self-published author. He wasn't actually published by any publisher. He self-published those first 2 books. The Missing 411 books now are massively popular. But it wasn't quite true to say that he was a published author, no, not in the traditional sense anyway. So I thought that was he changed history a little bit to suit his point.
You see he have his books in the books in the American library or the British library, they're registered, they have ISBN
Congress
numbers. Congress, there you go. So it's like, are you really, fella? Are you really a published author? Because I can write loads of things and say I've published them. I can print loads of them, hand them out on the street, and technically speaking, I'm an author and it's been published. So again, there's an element of deception there, just in those words alone.
Yeah, I think deception's maybe is maybe a little harsh, but it seems to be he's changed. He changed the facts to make his point.
I'm a harsh man, Jamie.
So
I'm a harsh man.
Yeah, but any of his saints.
I don't think anybody's a saint, are they?
No, exactly.
God knows I'm not. So
glass houses.
Did you stop watching Terminator 2 because Schwarzenegger slept with his maid and you thought it was abhorrent of him and everything he'd ever done was just not worth it anymore because he made
tore down all the Arnold Schwarzenegger posters?
I said, did you stop watching Terminator 2 because Schwarzenegger slept with his maid and you just and you were disgusted by that? That made you just discount all of his previous work? No. People make mistakes and people do things motivated in the wrong way sometimes, don't they? I don't think anyone's perfect.
Well, we're all quite greedy to a point.
I don't believe in Terminator as being the truth.
Well, no.
I like to separate fantasy from reality.
That was just an example. It was just trying to highlight, did you stop watching a really popular film? You know what I mean? Because of a story that came out about someone.
It's well known that is one of us on the panel is always going to have a wooden spoon. It just so happens tonight it was me. That's all.
I love stirring things up. So it's one of my favourite things to do. I just love saying things just to annoy people sometimes. I can't help myself.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I if I'm going to say what I personally believe and then we can go around the tiles and you can tell me what you think. But I actually don't think there's a great deal in this. I honestly don't. I think far too many people now wander off into the wilderness unprepared. One of these cases I read about how this guy was a photographer, and he was dropped off by his mate, and even his mate, as he was dropping him off, said he's not prepared for this. And then he went missing, and his bones and bits were found months later, sort of thing. And even his mate was saying he wasn't prepared for that. He didn't have the right equipment. He was definitely going to die. But that somehow got into the 411. To me, that sounds like it was just a bad situation. Other ones I've read. One was a guy was a hunter, and he was a famous hunter that hunted in Africa and things. And he was at the side of a lake, and they found there with his bow and arrow, and he was hunting moose apparently. And he again was found, no sign of a struggle, but they just found bits of teeth. His bow and arrow was still sat there perfectly. That's weird. That doesn't make any sense. How would a trained hunter get caught by a wild animal? And then you've got the other side of actually how many wild animal attacks are there in North America? It's almost none. It's like 5 or 6 big cat human attacks and 5 to 10 bear attacks a year. In Canada, it's a bit more because polar bears have started to encroach into towns and things, and they're angry little buggers, but big buggers, I should say. But wild animal attacks don't happen a great deal in North America. But accidents do happen. And people do go into these places and they do fall into ravines and they think they're going to get rescued and they think their mobile phones will work and they don't, because they just don't seem to recognize risk anymore. So I think some of these cases are really interesting, but I think it's a bit like Nick Pope says about aliens, that 95% of these cases are probably nonsense. 5% are interesting and worth looking at. And I think probably 95% of the 411 cases are nonsense, are just accidents, murderers, people going missing.
I don't think you've done enough research personally on that.
I wouldn't go quite that high in the numbers. Maybe if they hadn't already done. So he's profiled all of these cases to trim out the 95% in the first place before they supposedly made it into the missing 411. Isn't that the purpose of the profile?
But even a lot of the cases we mentioned today could have easily had very boring, mundane.
All right, then. What about your guy that was 84 years old that couldn't really walk anywhere, that disappeared? Where did he go?
Fell in a river and was washed away. I say that with tongue in cheek a little bit, but there could be very boring reasons what happened to that man. He could be dead somewhere, and there are. I hear a lot of reasons go, well, that child was obviously picked up by an eagle and carried off. What? No, it wasn't. That's just the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But there are very boring, mundane reasons why people go missing, and people do die and then don't get found, particularly in the wilderness. It's.
Yeah, I agree with that. I definitely agree with those comments. Yeah, in the wilderness, people go unprepared. Yes, and a lot of deaths can be accounted for, and probably some have snuck into this 411. I agree that you probably could reasonably account for through normal. Yeah,
not dismissing all of them. Like I said, not dismissing all. And 95%, which is a number I pulled out top of my head because that's what Nick Pope says about aliens. I'm not dismissing all of them, but I'm saying a lot of them don't seem anything to me. They just seem like they're much more likely to be a very boring thing. They seem strange, but a lot of stuff does. They're talking about how sometimes there's no tracks found, but then in the same breath they talk about there's strange weather conditions. So, well, rain is really good at washing tracks away, and also washing scents away and things. And animals struggle to track. So
what they're commenting on there is they're commenting on that quite a lot of the time after these disappearances occur, they appear to freak weather conditions roll in and then destroy any chance of them tracking them. Although saying that, in a lot of these cases, the dogs don't seem to want to track anything anyway, or can't find a scent to track. Almost like they've changed frequency and they're in a different dimension, and there is nothing to track because they're no longer in this current dimension.
They're missing 411 case. Yeah, that's it.
Well, a lot of the cases, they reckon the dog just sits down and refuses to move. That's strange.
I don't know. I always trust animals. Animals seem to know when a load of birds or a load of wildlife starts clearing out of an area. That's when you know a volcano is about to erupt, or that even if you're in the middle of the forest in the middle of the night, and all the wildlife started running away from you, you'd start running in the same direction it was running, wouldn't you? Because you're assuming something's not good coming your way. So if dogs won't follow a scent, they're telling you there's nothing there. Something it stopped like there. They didn't travel anywhere over land in any direction around. Otherwise, the dog would be able to track it. Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think, Steve? I've had a rant.
I think that it's not that you're wrong. It's just that you're a little bit closed-minded, aren't you?
I try to be open-minded, but you got to look at the evidence. I see.
Not try. Just be open-minded. Just think that anything is possible until proven not possible. Do you know what I mean? The facts are there right in front of you. You know, it's like, oh, he was probably fell into the river or taken back. No, he wasn't, because then cases have been dismissed. Do you know what I mean? So the 411 cases are there for a reason, because nobody knows what the F happened. Do you know what I mean? It's not an eagle, or it's not a flipping mountain lion or a kidnapper or anything like that. No, that's a load of BS. What is going on is something that we have no clue about. Do you know what I mean? It's like Dave was saying before, you know, different frequencies, different dimensions, and all that sort of stuff. It's happening, you know, and you have to be, I don't know, a little bit blinded to not see that there is something surprisingly odd going on.
I don't, like I said, I'm open to the possibility that some of these cases are odd, but in the same respect, if you're going to be open-minded, you've got to be open to the possibility that this actually is just, there are very boring reasons for a lot of these.
Yeah, that is. I do like Shrimp Shack's comment. I do like that comment in the film Snatch about bricked up feet in the
body in a few hours.
Yeah, exactly. I do think there have probably been a lot of bodies disposed of that way in pig farm.
Hannibal movie as well,
especially since that film. Yeah, maybe some of these cases, maybe some that has happened. Who knows? But I don't know. There are some. The more you look into it, and the more cases you go over, the more mysteries there are, and the more weird things there are, and the more patterns there are between not just the ones in North America, but they're starting to look elsewhere, aren't they? They're starting to look into Canada now as well, finding patterns. Apparently, there's some really interesting patterns between North America and Australia, between some of the missing persons. That David, I need to look into it more and find out when he elaborates exactly what they are. But yeah, I don't believe there's nothing to it. I believe he's onto something. I don't think it'd be as popular as it is if there wasn't something overall links between.
The other thing I would say is as well, I've spent a lot of time wandering around woods in my years. I'm counting as well as if a wood's dense enough, you can walk 2 or 3 feet into a tree line and not know where the hell you are, and get lost really, really quickly. Yeah, and I do think there's also an element of that. And you can wander off and think you're walking in a straight line, and you're actually walking in circles or walking, whatever. Or think you've turned around and going back the way you've come, and you're actually just, you're going completely the wrong direction. These things do happen.
And people are mollycoddled. I suppose the mollycoddled people aren't the ones that go out into the wilderness generally anyway. It's normally the adventurous ones that go there anyway. So they're normally the ones that are a bit more aware. There are some missing 411 cases about people that aren't very well prepared, but a lot of them are about, like, I don't know, extreme outdoorsmen, hunters, people that have gone and tracked. That one you mentioned earlier was someone that had gone and tracked tigers, hadn't they, in the jungle?
Tigers and lions and things,
yeah. Before they went and it's
quite a famous hunter apparently.
That's not to be taken lightly, is it? Tracking tigers for a living.
Exactly. Come on, Steve. What do you think? Got the final word.
I think that it's something that we just can't comprehend at the moment. There's something definitely going on. There is a connection or something to do with water and boulders, rocks. There is, there's no footprints. There's no flipping scent or anything whatsoever. And just want to quickly add that there was a case, and it's in the film. I think it's the first film, could be the second, where one of the SNR's search and rescue group are chatting, and she says that there was on what was a missing 411 and or fell into that category, and this little girl had been missing for a few days, and there was a mist which shouldn't have been there for that time of year and time of day and stuff like that. And the search and rescue people were walking towards this mist, and out of the mist walked the little girl, completely dazed, didn't have a clue where she was or anything like that, but she was found alive. And the dogs didn't have any scent. They couldn't smell her. They couldn't see her. the whole area had been searched previously, and she just appeared, literally out of the mist.
Crazy. Dave?
So,
evidence of absence isn't absence of evidence, either way. Okay, and just because there isn't tracks of anything like that left that we haven't found doesn't necessarily prove that there isn't a prosaic explanation. I have to defend you and agree with a lot of what you've said, Jamie, actually. But just because we don't understand it doesn't mean that it's anything other than the fact that we haven't. As human beings, we expect to think that we have all the answers and that we understand everything. That's what leads to mystery in the first place. I think a big chunk of them can be explained if only we can find the answers to them. And, you know, I think, like you said, being open-minded does work both ways. You know, you do have to be open-minded.
of course you do, yeah.
Both sides, to be all-encompassing, and as a researcher. However, some of them, you know, they're so difficult to explain. These are like, you know, as the other guys have pointed to, there shouldn't be any reason why these people should just disappear completely in the manner that they have, and to just cast it aside as being completely nothing. I also think he is onto something. I'm not entirely sure what it is. I don't like the fact that he will change the constraints of what he dictates as being what quantifies as a case. I think it's to garner more impetus behind it because there's more of them, you know.
More notoriety, I suppose, yeah.
To sort of add validity to it by weight of numbers. And I would say the percentage is probably quite high that when we do know what's going on, by default, obviously we can explain them away. So I think, a lot of them are just down to very prosaic explanations, but there are enough of them. If you look, if you research enough they're going to have you scratching your head. I do think he's onto something.
And I'd agree with you, most definitely. There's some of these cases that just defy logic completely. I just question that he has always got another book to release. And that's why I would agree with you, Dave, that he seems to be adding more and more cases and changing the constraints. And actually, that's why if I say I don't think there's much to this 411, I don't. I think there's something I think there's some weird things going on here, and there's some of these cases completely make no sense. And it's, you know,
as he's becoming more famous. Sorry, Jamie. As he's becoming more famous, as there's more views on YouTube, as the books are selling more, the cases are growing. And is it because it's happening more? Is it linear in its the research rate and the amount of cases?
He's actually coming off of YouTube as well. Yeah, he's trying to find somewhere else to put his videos up. Firstly, because people were just ripping his stuff, like Mr. Ballon, for instance, who didn't really look into it as deeply as what obviously David Paulides is doing, because he's just using David Paulides' work. They had a little bit of a falling out, and as far as I know, this was excuse me, this was about 6 months ago, and they were able to sort something out. I don't know what it was, but and he's only got 2 missing 4. Oh no, he's got a few more books out now, isn't he?
He's got about 4
but yeah, why not? You know, if you can publish books, get books out there, why not? Why not make money?
You know? I have no problem with that.
No, it's always money. They came to an arrangement. They came to a deal, didn't they? Money.
You see, that's the thing, though. Is that the correct incentive to do it? Why not make money? If you're going to make money off it, why not? Well, people are missing and families are affected by it. Yeah, you know, it's a bit flippant way to describe it.
Yeah, but anybody that focuses on anything in their life,
families that go missing.
I do. Again, I've done enough research on it to have my own opinion, no matter what you say. It's not like I've gone into it blindly. You know, I respect what you're saying, guys, but I've not sat on my backside and took your words for it. I've looked into it too. And I have my own opinion. And my own opinion is it can't be ignored the fact that as the popularity is growing, the case numbers are growing. And is it just because more and more people are disappearing? No, it's because he's changing the parameters of what he considers to be a case to validate it more.
Is there another argument that he's finding more cases as the story becomes more popular? And I agree with you. He
changing the confines,
but he is going to find more cases as other people, because other people are now going to come forwards, aren't they, and say,
"Well, I've had a strange.
I've heard about this. Have you heard about this case?" And that is going to happen as well. Just to play devil's advocate, sort of thing.
Yeah, of course, it's going to happen again as well, but it's not going to change the amount of people that disappear. You know, the people that disappear are going to disappear anyway, aren't they? Them numbers aren't going to change. Just the knowledge of that people that have changed, and you're going to see more of them coming to the 411 case files as he changes the remit of what makes a 411 case. That doesn't change. That is just a hard fact, whether people want to say it or not. And coming away from YouTube doesn't prove his intent. You know, let's see him on documentaries on TV soon. If his intent is to genuinely help people, then all power to him, and he deserves a massive pat on the back. You know, but let's not just, you know, let's not lose sight, or he shouldn't lose sight of what it is that he's trying to do, which is what, as a researcher, what any of us should be doing, really, not just be open-minded, but not lose focus on what we try to do by the topic we're trying to pursue.
Yeah.
He doesn't seem disingenuous, does he? When you hear him talking about things, he seems to have a genuine interest in what he's doing, and believes in it. And that's why I think he's very careful to not overstretch what he speculates is causing it, and just try and present, I suppose, the facts from the cases. He doesn't seem like he's trying to mislead anyone, does he?
I picked that case earlier this evening, hours ago now. Because actually it was a missing persons case that was closed and was reopened following it being raised as a 411 case. I mean, I think that might not have been his intention, but that is actually a huge win. That family potentially could. It hasn't happened yet, but
yeah,
I think you've made a really good point there, Jamie. You know, what we should come away with from this one is the fact that if anybody is being helped by the actions of David Paulides and the work that he's doing, if any family's torment is laid to rest or made any easier by the actions that he's undertaking, then it's a very noble cause. And the more people that become aware of it, the better. You know, so I do think there's something in it. You know, I think it's very, very plaudibly what he's trying to do.
He is very quite what's the word I'm trying to use? Sort of quite fierce with letting people know that they should, if they're going out on patrols and things like that they should have a locator beacon or something to or a phone or something with GPS on as well. So he is sort of
trying to push the safety aspect as well, which is again very noble.
All
right, well guys, I've got to go up in the morning. Having a job sucks. I just want to do this for a living, so it'll be much more fun. But I've really enjoyed this conversation, and if you are new to the channels, all three of our channels, they're all have links in the description. Please go subscribe. Join us on the Mystery Machine Facebook page, where we put all these things, and tell us what you'd like us to talk about in the future. That would be great. And if you do go out into the woods, be careful.
And next week, I believe it's me, is it? I believe
it is Dave. So what are we doing, Dave?
We're going to do. This is a bit of an old one, but there's still the mystery is there. I'm going to do Jack the Ripper.
Oh, mate, good. I've been talking about
doing Jack the Ripper.
How many times have I said I want to do Jack the Ripper? How many times? My mom and dad genuinely were scared of me, I think, when I was a little boy, because they asked me, I was only about 8, and they said, what do you want for Christmas, Jamie? Goes, can I have a book on Jack the Ripper, please? I think they thought I was going to kill him in their sleep or something.
I remember going to the London Dungeons when they had the Jack the Ripper special when I was a little kid. That was I remember how many years ago that was now. That was probably in the early 90s.
Yeah, I went to see the Walter Sickert paintings.
The Michael Caine movie is the best one. Mate, I can't wait. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to get my old Jack the Ripper book out.
Jack the Ripper.
Fantastic. some really good theories in the last couple of years we'll get our teeth stuck into. Fantastic. Yep. All right then, mate. It's been lovely. Thank you very much, guys. And
yes,
see you next time.
Thank you all. See you next week.
Thank you.
Bye. Cheers, guys. Take care. Remember, like, subscribe.
Share the video. Bye.
You're too lively for the end there.